I want to thank everybody for being here. It's a great mix of students, staff, and faculty, and I think we're all excited to hear from this illustrious crew. I want to start with this group and ask them to tell you a little bit about what does integrity mean to them. We'll start with Jeff Long.
Yes. Am I on? Everybody hear me? Okay. I look at it very simplistically. To me, integrity means simply acting with the values that you as an individual has, or the institution which you may represent or work for. It's an unwavering commitment to doing what's right. And that's, to me, integrity, that is what integrity means. It's kind of that unbroken bond between your beliefs and your actions. So that's what integrity means to me and how I use it to practice both in my personal and professional life.
Obviously about the same as Mr. Long. When I think about, my integrity and how I'm working every day, or being a husband or a father or a friend or anything like that, I think about doing those things when nobody's looking. I think about the decisions that I could make that could affect people, and how I make them when they might not fully realize that I made them. I think those times when you can take a shortcut, well, they won't realize that I did it anyway, so why don't we just not worry about it today? And so having that integrity, making those strong decisions and doing those things when nobody's paying attention.
I think what I would add to that, and just real quickly, my background is in accounting, in finance. So that's been my career. That's who I am as a person, okay? I do that in college athletics. So I'll try to tailor my responses to the finance world. So everything these guys just said, okay, acting ethically, okay, having morals, strong principles, okay, with the way you conduct your business, okay? And then to add to that, it's a personal choice, okay? That's a choice we all have to make a personal choice to act with integrity in my personal life and my professional life, even when that's not something that's easy to do, okay? And it has to be consistent as well, okay? I can't decide to act with integrity just some of the time. Okay, it has to be consistent with everything you do in your personal life and your professional life as well.
Okay, next question. Can you describe an experience during your academic career, perhaps when you were in college, or later as you've been at other institutions, that has influenced or shaped your perspective on integrity now as a professional? And we'll start with John this time.
Great. So again, we always have to give little bits of background. So I was not the best student in the world. Obviously. Yeah, right, exactly, right. When I was like in middle school, early high school, I was really fortunate. I went to a real elite prep school. And everybody in the school they're brilliant people, and I'm not sure how I ended up there. But I mean, I was a D student, and I couldn't figure out in some ways why I wasn't. I felt like I was intelligent, but I wasn't getting grades. And I realized that you really have to get yourself committed to what you're doing. It's easy to say, oh, I want to be an athletic director, or I want to be this or that, I want to be an attorney, I want to be an accountant. But until you decide to commit to what you're doing and really get after it and do all the things necessary, you're going to really struggle. And I literally learned that in Asian history. I grew up in Honolulu, Hawaii. I learned that in Asian history in 10th grade. I couldn't understand why I couldn't remember all the dynasties and stuff like that. And I realized I've got to commit myself to doing it. And really when I did that, I became a better student. But I think that really taught me something about how to work and how to do things in general.
Okay, so real quick, are there any accounting students in the audience today? No way. An accounting professor? No way. One accounting professor, how about that?
Statute limitations passed on that.
Passed on that. See, all the accounting students are in class right now. So what I'll share, though, just what I learned in my academic career. I think in accounting, certainly, there's some fundamental concepts that they teach you. Okay, there's a right way to account for the finances of an organization, and then there's a wrong way, okay? So they taught you there's a right way to do the accounting. Okay, if you're an auditor, the way to audit a company, auditing financial statements, there's a right way. If you're not doing it the right way, then it's wrong, okay? So certainly in my academic career from the very start, there was some fundamentals that I was taught, okay, on how you conduct business. And that's carried with me certainly throughout my career as I've gone. You know, there's, in anything that I do now, all right, there's the right way of doing the accounting, okay? You may have to adjust the way you manage your business to fit that, but from the very start, that was fundamental with me. There's a right way to handle your business. And for me to be an accountant, that's how I was going to have to conduct myself in my profession, or I needed to decide to do something different.
You know, I think about it this way. I think about back when I was a student at Ohio Wesleyan University, and I was a Division III student athlete, and I think the first time I came face to face with the academic integrity question for me was a student athlete at Ohio Wesleyan. I'm sure all of you, or many of you, may have become aware of maybe a test that's gotten out from a professor, and you know, maybe even back in my day, maybe, I'm sure it doesn't happen today, but I think many of the fraternities and sororities maybe had files on such things. I don't know. But, you know, I was faced with it at that time because I had a choice to make. I had the opportunity to, you know, take those tests and use those tests to prepare me for a test. But, you know, but believe me, a big part of me wanted to do it because it was the easy way. It was the corner to cut. I could get a better grade, and grades were important to me, and I thought, you know, I could do this. But honestly, I made the choice to go in another direction, not do that. I had teammates on my football and baseball teams that did. They scored better on the tests and exams than I did. But I always went back to who I represented. One, myself, my family, all those values that I learned growing up, but also to my teams, my baseball team, my football team. I always thought about what if I was the one that was found to be cheating or doing something inappropriate, then I would be the poster child of the negativity, not only for myself, but the team I represented and such. So that's when I was faced with it, I think, as a student. And it really had an impact on me that others were doing it, not choosing the path I chose. Many of them are still my friends today, but you know, I made a conscious choice. And again, it goes back to what John said. You know, probably could have done it and nobody would have ever known, but I knew it myself, and that's what was important in the end.
Could you each tell us who one or more of your role models are as they relate to integrity? Starting with Clayton.
Okay. Well, outside of these two individuals, I'll share. And I don't know if I necessarily have a role model, but I do want to share a specific situation that happened early on in my career that I feel like had a strong impact on how I conduct myself in business. I spent a number of years at Alltel Corporation. If you're not familiar with Alltel, it was a telecommunications company based out of Little Rock. A gentleman named Joe Ford was the CEO of Alltel. Okay, and a group of us were meeting with Joe Ford one day, and Joe posed the question. He said, you know, Clayton, who do you work for? And my response was, well, you know, I work for Larry right here. And he said, no, that's the wrong response. You don't work for Larry. You work for Alltel Corporation. You work with Larry Templeton. And that was a very simple concept to learn at that time, that no one individual is bigger than an organization. That's something that's stuck with me throughout the years, because I think the problems you see with integrity and unethical conduct in business is often an individual putting their personal agenda ahead of an organization. Okay, so again, that simple lesson for me was there's no one individual. Clayton Hamilton is not bigger than the University of Arkansas. No one individual is bigger than the organization that they work for. That's an example of something that's really stuck with me.
To me, I had three that really stand out. First, my father, and I won't go into that father-son relationship, but I learned an awful lot about that from my father. And then secondly, you know, for me, I'm a sports guy. It was a high school football coach. It was an individual that I had such respect for. I learned so much from beyond the sport of football. It really wasn't about football. Football was a vehicle in which he taught the lessons about life that I carry with me today. And then it was reinforced in college when I worked for pretty much a famous football coach, Bo Bo Schembechler, if some of you younger guys may not have heard of him, but some of the olders have. You know, a man of great integrity, a man who had a very successful one-loss record, but again understood that football was just a vehicle to teach. Now, trust me, he had a burning desire to win on the football field, probably unequaled, but he was a man who would not do what many others did, look the other way, cut the corner to be successful. And quite honestly, he's probably not as successful as he could have been if he had done those things that maybe some of his competitors had done. So left a great impact on me, and that's probably why you see that sports has had a huge impact on me, and it goes well beyond just the wins and losses of a particular team or department.
It wouldn't have been the right thing to do, but Clayton and I had a nice little scheme for this, for him to say I was his role model, and I was going to say he was my role model. We had a great little scheme. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. So maybe maybe we should leave the panel immediately. I would say a little bit like Jeff. I mean, I could name some people. You might not know who they were. My father, you know, he has always, you know, exhibited a great deal of integrity in making proper decisions. One of his best friends and both of our former bosses, we both coached for him. A guy named Dick Tomey was the head coach at Hawaii, head football coach at Hawaii, at Arizona, at San Jose State, coaching the pros and other colleges as well. But a little bit like Clayton, I thought about the ideas and the philosophies that make them role models and people that I looked up to. And it goes back to my idea about academic success too. You have to be committed to what you're doing. They had the ability to make tough decisions, to make decisions that might not feel popular right that second. My guess is we're all going to come back to that theme before it's over with. And really say, this is what I'm doing. If you disagree with me, you're welcome to, but I'm making this decision, that's what I'm going with. So that was really important. And something that I'm a runner, I'll probably reference that a couple times too, and I've noticed that your ability to do the right thing, your ability to succeed, is directly correlated to your ability to withstand pain. And you know, like Jeff has made some tough decisions here that were probably pretty painful. I've seen Dick Tomey make painful decisions with his players, with his staff, and things like that. And that ability to do those things are characteristics of people that we should probably all look up to.
Excellent, and that provides a great segue into the question, tell us each about a time when you had to make a difficult decision, and there was the possibility of an adverse reaction from others, and how did you manage the situation? And Jeff, we're going to start with you.
You know, it's never occurred to me. Obviously, the Coach Petrino situation was one that certainly comes to mind, and you know, to me, it just goes back to what is integrity and what does it mean, and it means an unwavering commitment to what you believe in and what you're doing, and certainly what Coach Petrino did was contrary to the ethics, morals, values that we in turn try to teach our student athletes in our program. So the bottom line for me in that situation was I couldn't look myself in the eye, I couldn't look myself in the mirror and make any decision other than the one that I did. I couldn't look at a student athlete, and I know there's a few in here today, I couldn't look them in the eye and talk about what's important in life if I had made a different decision. You know, it wasn't easy. There were many people who felt there were other corrective actions that could have been instituted to quote, save the coach, give him a second chance, and all those things. Certainly others may have chosen that route. Others could have chosen that route. I think there are a number of colleagues that I consider friends in this business that would have chosen another route because winning was too important. Or the pressure from those around the program was such that it would have forced them to make a decision that they didn't want to make. I will say in this situation that it took more than just me making a decision. You know, I report to people. I report to the chancellor of this university, I report to the president of the system, and I report to the board of trustees. So it could have, anywhere along the chain of command could have stopped what I felt was the right thing to do. And you know what? At that point, I've often thought about, well, what would you have done? Well, you work for those people, you would have done what they told you to do, but you also knew that you could no longer work in that environment and were at that institution. So I often think about how blessed I am that I had people above me that were committed to the same values that I had personally and professionally for the institution. And I think there's a couple things in there that maybe we'll get to in a minute, but you know, there are certain personal values you have, and there's also institutionals that you have to go by as well. So as you all know, you know, very difficult situation, very high profile, very public. And then one last thing I'll say before I let others talk. I will say a lot of times still today, people misunderstood what that decision was about. They think it was a moral decision about a coach who was having an affair and his wife. Really, while that is personally morally reprehensive to me, I could not have changed his employment with us for that act alone. What a person does in an individual personally outside of the office is not something that I have the scope to cover. So he could have done that and continued to be our coach. What he did was violate ethical standard of being honest and repeatedly being dishonest, and even when in face of the facts being dishonest. So really it was that function of dishonesty in the workplace that allowed me to exercise the contractual obligation to terminate him for cause.
Sure. My examples won't be as, I guess, exciting. Did not get front page news like that one did, but I've had a number of situations in my career where I've had to either investigate or address fraud within an organization. I spent 3 years again at Alltel Corporation, and my role was in the internal audit department. We had a number of, part of that role was investigating fraud. So we had a number of situations where there was one where an individual was flat out lying on expense reports to the tune of about $20,000 of expenses over the course of a couple years. A situation where a pretty high-ranking manager within the corporation had created a fictitious company that sent invoices back to Alltel to pay his fictitious company. Had a situation where a young single mother stole cash and checks from a retail store. That one actually ended up in court where I had to go testify against this young single mother. That was a very difficult situation to be in, but really at the core it was about doing my job. I had a job to handle the business affairs at that time for Alltel Corporation in a certain way. And in that situation it was to address the fraud that had taken place. Had a situation at Florida State. I spent 5 years at Florida State in their athletic department, and Florida State football is a big deal, right? Certainly at Florida State, their football program is a big deal. I came across some fraudulent activity within their football program, misuse of funds for a personal nature. You had to address it. That was my job to address that situation with their football program. Ended up with a certain individual being terminated. So none of that's fun to do, certainly not comfortable situation to be in. But I've always viewed my job, right, working for whatever particular entity, to address those situations that may come up. Okay.
So quick piece of background. So I'm at the time maybe 28, 29 years old. First major job for me, probably as kind of a senior staff level. I was the compliance officer at a place called Fresno State. Had a really tough basketball coach there named Jerry Tarkanian. Most of you might not know who that is, but the people who are laughing, you younger people should look him up. And so,
As to how not to conduct.
Right, absolutely, yeah. So it was kind of at the opposite end of the spectrum, what we're talking about. So we had a basketball player there, an incoming freshman. So the kid's, dealing with an 18-year-old kid. We have clear evidence of SAT fraud. Kid's cheated on his test. I'm going through the normal stuff, and I have hard evidence from the SAT. But that's going to be a tough decision because on the one hand, no one publicly knows that. it's protected information. It's all kind of things that there are all kind of things that can't become public about that. And so, you're going to have to deal with a really tough situation, with a really high-profile situation, with people in some manner above me, especially at the time as a 28-year-old. I certainly hadn't earned much respect, and I'd only been working there for about 5 months. And so, in thinking about how to manage that and what to actually do, again, I think this is a theme in integrity, is avoidance often seems like the easiest thing at the time. When you're faced with a tough decision, when you have to act with integrity, oftentimes when you think through your own thoughts is, wow, if I just ignore it for a little while, maybe it'll go away. And so, I chose and had to address it just full head on. I've got to walk into an office with a coach who's coached for 30 years, unbelievably successful, and just say, here's what it is, here's what we're doing. I'm not giving anybody any choice. I'm not giving advice to the guy who's 60 or 65 years old at the time, whatever he was, and to the athletic director, to the president of the university. And I said, no, we just don't have a choice. This is what we're going to do. And kind of getting that conversation started, to me, is the hardest part of being honest and having integrity. Once you get the ball rolling, and I find it's not as bad. It's still uncomfortable and painful, like I addressed a minute ago, but once you get it moving and go ahead and getting it addressed and getting it out in the open, that's how you have to manage those things, in my opinion.
Could you each describe your decision-making process in really evaluating how to do the right thing, or in integrity decision-making? And there are a couple questions on here that talk a little bit about doing the right thing versus what might be better for the bottom line or for the institution. And maybe I wanted to combine that with the one about what are the steps you take in deciding how to balance those and how to come out with the right answer. I think it's John's.
Sure. All right, so in a quick synopsis of decision-making kind of process, one of the things I really believe in, I'm a compliance person by trade, like we're talking about kind of our backgrounds, and typically analytical, research-oriented, all that kind of stuff. And so what I really try to think about is getting that emotion out of the way. I talk to my kids about their athletes. I talk about play smart. Don't play with emotion, play smart. Emotions are also negative. Playing smart and doing things smartly and intelligently. So I try to get the emotion out of the way as quickly as I can. I think that allows you to analyze the situation. And then kind of in the other context, you have to juggle the needs of, like Jeff kind of alluded to before, the needs of the university, needs of the department, needs versus of an individual. If we have a compliance situation, of an NCAA violation or a potential one, well, it's going to hurt the young man or young woman in the short term, maybe even in the long term. In the SAT fraud case, the kid was suspended for an entire year. And so that kind of stuff, the needs of the individual had to be weighed against the needs of the university. So I really think about juggling those things, and there's really no one right answer, unfortunately. That's what makes it really difficult. If I look at it, if I research enough, there will be one answer. That's not the way he has to deal with life. It's certainly not the way he deals with life. And so if you can, learn how to juggle those things, maybe you got a chance. So.
And I think related to that, trying not to just react to an issue that may be presented. And like what John was saying, I'm a person that has to take the information in. Okay, I'm going to try to get all the facts on the table, take it in, make sure I understand the situation. And I have to process all that information before I respond. Okay, and I think during the course of processing that information, whatever personal and professional values, the integrity, all that starts to play out. As you get the information, you process it, it's going to test your integrity, then hopefully whatever response comes out of that will be in line with whatever your ethics, your personal and professional ethics may be. So I have to take the information in, process it, before I respond. But a couple specifics of what I try to do, certainly to me there's a can we or can't we decision that has to be made, okay? And that, for example, may be, can we afford, to make a purchase or whatever that financial issue may be, okay? Is it within the policies of the university or the athletic department? So can we, can't we, that's kind of the black and white answer that has to be made. And then beyond that, for me, there's a should we or shouldn't we, okay? So can we, can't we, and then should we or shouldn't we react or respond in a certain way? And to me, that kind of, that'll balance against whatever maybe your mission statement is, whatever your priorities for your department may be, okay? So you process, can we or can't we accomplish something? Then should we or shouldn't we take a certain step or certain action, so.
Let me answer by saying I'm one of those, picking up on John. I'm generally going to react emotionally first of all, but I know myself well enough now, after many years of living on this earth, I've got to step back and I've got to find the facts. You can't react to the innuendo or the rumor or the whatever. You got to step back, make sure what your decisions are founded on the facts of the situation. And picking up, so I'll conclude that, but I want to pick up on your piece on the bottom line. Many times athletics, and myself in particular, are, I'm viewed as this money-driven athletic director that solely makes decisions based on the bottom line. Well, that's not true. Had I been, the bottom line decision would be keep Bobby Petrino at any cost. Find some way to give him that second chance, tell him that you're going to help him rehabilitate, because we had won 21 games in 2 years, and there's no question that he could be successful. But to me, that was a choice between rotting over time or making the sound decision to cut out the cancer and then regroup and move forward. So that's many times the question you're faced with when it comes to it. Doing the pacification, and we would rot. My view, we would have rot from within. We would have become less successful going forward. And certainly we cut the cancer out. Now we're moving forward, and certainly we have to overcome what it means to cut that cancer out, and that takes some time. But I do think that we will be back into that position where we're competing at a high level in a short period of time.
I have one other comment too, guys, because I made a note of it, and I just want to make sure. I learned this actually here. I probably thought I knew things before I got here, but the last few years have been really interesting. And especially with this topic, one of the things that I've had to learn is that decisions of importance, real decisions, are unpopular and unreasonable to someone at all times. When I was young, I always thought, well, I'll figure out the right decision, the best decision. But there is no best decision, oftentimes. There's no best decision in the Bobby Petrino situation. I don't think. There's no only one thing to do, because you could have decided, well, we'll rehabilitate him here instead of somewhere else. And that's the needs of the individual. That's the right thing to do. And you could argue that easily. But it's going to be unreasonable and unpopular to someone. So you have to take your morals, the institution's morals, or the company's morals, and ethics, and all put those together so you can make the best decision, or a best decision at that time. But getting over that hump of realizing you're going to make somebody mad every time is a big hump.
Okay, I'm going to ask 2 more questions, and then we're going to open it up to a few questions from the audience. Thank you. So, if you each could give us a little bit of advice on how you personally manage a situation where you know that somebody is acting unethically, and perhaps some takeaways for the individuals in the room. We'll start with Clayton.
I mean, it probably plays in with a lot I just said. Try not to react. Try to get all the information, make sure you understand the situation. But for me, the bottom line is you have to address that situation. You can't turn your cheek. You can't let a situation go unaddressed. If somebody's acting unethically, okay, not following rules, etc., you have to address that situation. That's my job, and certainly the financial role, to address whatever situation we may be presented with. So at the end of the day, you got to address it.
Yeah, head on, face to face as soon as possible, because you're actually doing that individual a favor, because undoubtedly the first thing that you come across that's unethical or immoral or whatever is not the first time they've done something like that. So the sooner you can confront them, and you have to, and that's what a leader does, that's what a department head does, and that's why you're in that leadership position, because you have to understand that it's your role to step up, confront it face to face, and you're really doing that person a favor, helping them get on, hopefully on the right track so they can continue with a successful future.
And kind of piggybacking, and then I have one other comment. Do the research. You got to know what you're talking about. You can't say, well, I think they're maybe embezzling money, but I really don't know exactly how. You have to do as much research as you can so you can, again, as the investigator in me, so you can box them in. So you can figure out, so you can't let them have a, an argument out. You got to get them boxed in and try to force them to come clean, so to speak, or tell the truth. But the other thing that I think about when I deal with it, because I've learned kind of the hard way over time, is are you dealing with a rational or irrational situation? Okay? If you're dealing with an irrational situation, if someone is expecting something that can't really occur, the single mother, she thinks, unfortunately, that's an irrational decision. That's an irrational situation. She's making a clearly poor decision, but for great reasons in her own little world. Coach Tarkanian with me, he thought he could just do things, and it shouldn't matter whether you're really supposed to or not. And if you think you have an irrational situation, you have a problem. You're not getting out of that one. You have a real issue. If at least you can realize you have a rational situation, then at least you can start doing these other things we're talking about. But if you think you have, if you realize, wait, somebody's expecting something, an outcome that really can't occur, or they think they shouldn't have to worry about it, you have a real issue on your hands. And we've all dealt with those.
Okay, last question from me. What does #never yield mean in the context of integrity?
Unwavering, that's all it means. Never yield means unwavering to your commitment to do things the right way. Simply said, do the right thing.
I made notes. I thought it was a great question, first of all. I said it doesn't say never stop for a reason. Never yield means it's not a straight line. It's not perfect. You got to step back, you got to step forward, you got to step sideways, but over time, it's never wavering. It's not saying we're not going to stop. We're going to get ahead, we're going to make progress as steady as we can, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, but we're moving forward no matter what.
And I think I would add to that, I think for me that, in athletics, we're probably held to a little bit higher standard. Okay, certainly what happens even in our personal lives has the potential to be front page news at some point. So we're held to a higher standard, and integrity can never stop. And like what you just said, it never stops. Even checking out at 5 o'clock at the end of the day, you still have to use integrity, have to have high standards in the way you conduct yourself.
Let me add on to that one thing. We talk about in our department with student athletes, staff, the logo never comes off, whether you're at work or not. You're known in Razorback Athletics as a member of Razorback Athletics, and it can be the secretary in the basketball office to the athletic director, but we're always going to be viewed as representing Razorback Athletics in the University of Arkansas, and that's a tremendous responsibility to take, but if you choose to work in this situation, that's a responsibility you have to accept.
Okay, let's hear from you. Questions?
He's stumped.
Yes, please.
You look at this year with the fan going after the guy from Oklahoma State in the fight during the, Hawaii, Utah Valley or whatever.
Yeah, Utah Valley State.
And all the other stuff, and then what you see on the internet. How do you, I mean, you can't ignore it, but when you read some of the stuff they'll say about you, especially Jeff, how do you deal with that?
So the question is, how do I do when?
Part question, how do you take the lunacy out of being a fan? And then from a personal standpoint, how do you deal with, especially with the family, when you look at I'll look at some of the stuff online every day, and if there's not somebody questioning something that you've done, it's kind of like he can't get cancer fast enough, and then the next person will say he's going to come up with a cure for cancer.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It's a great question, but it really does go back to knowing who you are. I talk about college. College education is very important, But one of the biggest things you do as a student at college is discover who you are. Discover who you are, what you believe in, what you stand for. And then I say not only what you stand for, but what you won't stand for. So when I read something to my family, and I knock on wood, I think I've done a decent job with my 2 daughters about talking to them in advance about there's going to be criticism. There's going to be unfounded criticism of your father because I'm in a public situation. But so you really need to just know who you are, what you stand for, what you're all about. So when they come out of left field with criticisms of you, hey, you can look yourself in the mirror and know that, hey, I'm conducting my life and my professional life in the most correct way that I know how. So knowing that you're doing the right things allows a lot of that to roll off your back. The best thing I do is probably not read most of it, so that allows it to roll off easier. But really, truly, it comes back to knowing who you are, and that's part of education and part of a college education. But even more so, as I've developed in my professional life, you know, who I am, what I stand for, and I know at the end of the day, hey, I may not always get it right, but I know that I was trying to make the decision for the right reasons. And certainly there's always going to be opportunity for criticism, and you can't let that deter you from doing what you believe is right and moving forward.
I know. I try to remind myself, again, we're not certainly not nearly as public as Jeff, but we're still in a public environment. I try to remind myself that, hey, I'm just a person. That's all I am. I think especially in our environment with our coaches or things like that, it's easy to kind of get ahead of yourself. I'm more important than I think I'm more important than I really am. And my wife told me when I was like 28 or 29, probably when I was dealing with the SAT fraud case, could have easily been. Remember, you're not doing anything. You're helping young people grow up. You're not curing cancer. You're not doing this. You need to help them grow up. You need to keep your eyes focused on what you're really doing, and then you got a chance to be all right. I think when we start overthinking our own importance is when you start making bad decisions. So.
Probably just what I would add to that. I mean, certainly there was somebody who held my job before I had it, and there'll be somebody that's going to hold my job afterwards. Okay, all I can do is do the best job I can, and while I'm the CFO for Razorback Athletics, don't take myself too seriously. Don't think I'm too important than what I actually may be doing. Just do the best job that I can. So.
You're helping the students grow up, and that's kind of one of the focus. Yeah. And I know that over the past several years, the focus of the athletic department as a whole has really moved from retention to graduation. So how has kind of academic integrity played a role in that? Have you stressed it more with the student athletes, or can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, that's one of the areas that reports to me. And but Jeff, when he hired me, clearly said that's what we're going to be. That's what we stand for. And so, we try to do things to treat them like regular students. I would like to think, hopefully Monica or the student affairs kind of people would say that we don't go up there in the background when we don't think anybody will see and say, hey, let this kid off. Don't deal with this. Cover it up. Continue focusing on the right things, graduation rather than eligibility. Put my plug in for personal best. If you don't know what that is, we tell all our kids, you should be the best you can be. If that's a 2.2, then that's a 2.2. Don't worry about it. If it's a 3.2, don't be a 3.0. And that kind of culture we try to instill, but I don't know that we've had major talks about don't cheat. We did it the first couple of years. I'm pointing back at Eric Wood, our Associate AD for Student Athlete Services. So we probably had some more in the weeds conversations early when we got here to try to make sure the kids knew what we expected, but now it's much more cultural issue.
Yeah, I would say we've changed. One of the things I think our team is most proud of is we've changed that culture. We're not here to defend student athletes. We're not here to unduly or unfairly or incorrectly support them. They're young people. They have to be responsible for their actions. We certainly try to teach them what right from wrong is, especially when it comes to academic fraud, because I will say, as the internet has exploded and maybe as high school educations maybe don't clearly define what plagiarism is and what taking something off the internet is inappropriate. I think that line has become blurred, And so we have an obligation to make sure we teach young people what that delineation is. What is that? What is copying something off the internet and putting it into paper, and why doesn't that work? Because I'm not so sure they're all getting taught that back in their high school situation. So I'm very proud, and our team is, of changing the culture and the environment about academics in our athletic program. I think it's beginning to show in some of the rates, and certainly the things we monitor like GPA and such. And then I think if you could go back and look at the number of academic fraud issues we've had, I think they've gone down dramatically over the last 5 to 6 years.
My question kind of relates back to family. Because you are in the public eye, you know that you have to act with a certain level of integrity, but what if your family member doesn't? Like if one of your family members doesn't act with integrity, how do you deal with that situation?
I know what John does.
Oh, I knew you were going to do that. I knew you were going to do that. I beat the daylights out of my kids. That's what he was going to say. I promise you. Yeah, I know, really. No, I'm well known in the department. I'm really hard on my kids. I'm not physically hard on them, but I'm probably mentally hard on them. In all seriousness, I set that culture at home too. You know, I mean, if my children are still high school and middle school, but I think if they were an adult, I would absolutely hold them accountable just like anything else. I would support them and love them and all that stuff, but you know, I'm not going to get my kid off. You know, I'm not going to go find that out. So I try to set that tempo at home. I remind them, he probably does too, and not excluding Clayton, but I tell my kids, the logo doesn't come off either. You represent us, whether you like that or not. That's just part of what we do. It just is what it is. It's not bad. It's just a fact. You know.
Yeah, I think consequently, our children, at least in my 2 daughters' case, I think they grow up a little faster than what may happen in another home. Meaning, the expectation of their behavior and how they react with people much older than them, they have that opportunity to interact. So I think they develop a certain level of social maturity faster because of the role I'm in. But the same thing holds true. I mean, it's about accountability, and you know, I try to teach my children about you got to be responsible and accountable for your own actions. And you know, I think it starts at when it starts at home, it gives someone a better chance to being successful as they go through life.
I think for me, you know, my kids are still relatively young, 8 and 5, so I probably have not had, you know, as many situations to have to address. But what I do have to respond to is them asking questions. You know, what do you mean Bobby Petrino is no longer the head football coach? So you certainly have to be able to explain that to a young child about how somebody's decisions impacting their career and what that means. So, you know, we've had those teachable moments in our family as well.
Come back and ask him when his youngest daughter is 18.
Yeah.
18 more years.
She'll be a wild one, so that's on my radar.
His younger daughter's crazy.
Yeah.
She's funny.
Wow, she's not that bad. Come on.
We have time for one more question, if there's one more. Yes.
You've made some references to personal versus sort of more institutional values and morals. So what about when there's conflict between those two? You know, the idea of being a whistleblower, trying to either work from within the system or from outside of the system. Could you just comment on that?
Great question. I'll let one of you guys deal with that.
Hey, you do it.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, if it's my decision, you know, there should not be a conflict between my personal values and my professional decision. You know, in situations where you witness unethical conduct, again, I go back to it's my job. I've got to bring that to light. And that may look differently depending on the person or the situation, but you can't leave something unaddressed. If there's a problem out there, you can't say can't be the whistleblower. You know, if there's a problem out there, I owe it to the University of Arkansas to address that problem.
Yeah, and I'll say sometimes they do come in conflict because I may have a decision in my mind to say a simple thing, fire someone. Well, you know what? The institutional HR process may not allow me to do that. But the compromise in my mind is that I'm going to take, if I believe it's a fireable offense, but I'm not allowed to do that, I'm going to make sure that they get the strongest punishment or whatever within the system to stay consistent with my beliefs of that this individual needs to be punished for whatever that indiscretion is.
And then I would just say, kind of along Clayton's lines, that, you know, it looks different for any individual potentially, you know, whether you want to be that whistleblower or whether you just want to choose not to work there or something like that. Personally, I would probably choose to, you know, go find other employment. You know, I mean, maybe there would be a situation where I think I should be a whistleblower, but my personal, you know, attitude would probably be I don't want to work there anymore, and that would be enough for me.
And you know, I'm thinking about another response to your question. You know, real life is, you know, you might be in a situation where those above you, you know, aren't making the decision you believe is right. And you know, like most of us, we all have to work and earn a living and feed our children and such. So, you know, I'd never advocate that you make a decision that hurts you because you're trying to do the right thing. But I think, as John said, at some point you've got to say, do I want to work in an organization like that? And I will say, in my professional career, I have moved away from an institution of the department because I no longer believed in the way that they were conducting intercollegiate athletics. So I didn't quit on the spot, okay, because I had a wife and daughters, but you know, I made the decision that I'm going to pursue employment elsewhere, somewhere where their values align more with mine.
And so I have one more too, because I mean, just online. See, it's really important too. I mean, it triggered something. You can sense that environment. For example, I want to give the university and Jeff, you know, the compliment and kudos that we all deserve. Chancellor Gerhardt, we have you can tell whether there's integrity in place. We have a mechanism for a little bit of what you're talking about. I meet as the senior compliance officer. I meet with the chancellor, and actually the provost, but the chancellor too, every month, away from him, when he's not present. So I can say anything I want. I can go to the chancellor and say, hey, we've got something going on that isn't appropriate. And Jeff and the chancellor consciously put that mechanism in place, and that forces your hand a little bit to continue to be committed to integrity. I think that's really neat, and that's important. So if you see that the environment isn't like that, you may say, well, that's not a place I want to go to work if you're interviewing for a job or something like that.
I'll go a little bit further. That's something that, well, you know, and again, it's something I'm very proud of. Chancellor and I agreed to that at the beginning of my administration here. You know, I asked him if John could report to him because, again, we wanted an avenue where we were not looking like we were covering things up or, you know, trying to win at all cost, okay? So John has an independent relationship with the provost, with the chancellor. If they see things that aren't right, that I'm trying to protect someone or whatever, they've got an avenue directly to go above me and make sure to hold me accountable as well.
Well, thank you all. I want to thank everybody for being here. And what I hope we've learned today a little bit is we've discussed what's gone on in their lives and in athletics, but it should certainly translate into all of your lives. And I would say for the students then, thinking a little bit about when you're in the classroom and you see somebody doing something wrong, or when you have opportunities, we're certainly hoping that you will make the correct choice and that you will think about the value of your University of Arkansas degree, that in fact you're working hard for this degree. That is when we started the conversation about academic integrity, that somebody shouldn't be able to cheat for their degree. They shouldn't be able to, you know, so the examples that were given of plagiarism or somebody copying or looking at a test that's been taken, why should some people have that advantage and others not have that advantage? We should all work because this is a valuable commodity, a University of Arkansas degree, and as you're working for it, it becomes more valuable that somebody didn't cheat their way through. What I'd say for faculty and staff that are here is we certainly hope you'll continue these conversations with others in your areas, with students, and I want to thank Monica for all of her hard work. This is the Office for Academic Integrity and Initiatives, and she's put on this week and really structured all of this. We started a couple years ago redoing the Academic Honesty Code and trying to make it clearer and more defined so that everybody understood this is the policy, these are the processes, it's not going to drag on forever, because I can tell you 5 years ago, somebody might file an academic honesty case, and 18 months later, there were still appeals going on. So we've tried to work through all of the layers of bureaucracy, and Monica's done a great job with that. So let's give our panelists a hand, and thank you all very much.